Shaun Ryan, welcome to the Dyl Friends podcast, my friend. It's very exciting to have you in the studio today. 350 game, 8-time. You're an 8-timer. That's big.
Thank you. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Got a lot of questions to ask, and I'm a little bit upset about a few other things I need to bring up later, but we'll get to that
Get it
first.
off your chest.
Yeah. I've got a lot of disgruntled memories, some hard doings. I think I was done by the umpires a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to getting into it. How are you, firstly? What's news? Obviously, you're retired at the moment. You're retired. You do retire and you've come back before. Is this definite retirement?
It is.
Yep.
I've had a few messages where friends are calling BS on it, but I'm telling them that's it. I mean, there's a lot of upside to it in terms of time and family time, weekends back, in the footy yourself, all your weekends for a long part of the year are taken up. But you do miss the group. And as much as you commit to staying in touch, the reality is you've gone from seeing them 3 times a week to not seeing them. So there's that sort of void that you work through. But other than that, I'm really enjoying the time, yeah.
I found that as well, not that I had as long as career as you, but you feel like when you leave a team, you're like, I'm going to miss these guys so much. But as soon as you move on, you just go, it's incredible how quickly you just adapt to things and you just get used to the new norm.
Yeah, you replace it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. And they do as well, and you do keep in touch, and it's when you see them again, it's like, the last time you seen them, it's fantastic, but everyone's got a life and everyone moves on pretty quickly. Yeah.
They do. They definitely do. Let's get into it, Shaun. What is your first memories of getting into umpiring? Obviously, as I said, you're one of the most decorated umpires the AFL in the AFL's had, and we'll get into that a lot today. But how did you first get into it? You were saying before off camera you weren't actually a footballer growing up. It wasn't like that.
I was a footballer. Like, I grew up in Warrnambool,
Yep.
the country, and it was football in the winter, cricket in the summer. And I was one of a large family, 7 kids, 5 boys. We used to belt the crap out of each other in the backyard. It was just a mud pit, all that sort of stuff. So it was awesome times. But I was saying that our family was a racing family. So, I grew up, my dad was a sort of champion jockey as a kid, and then got too heavy at about 20. My brother was a jockey. I've got an identical twin brother. He's a horse trainer. And my uncle won the Melbourne Cup when I was about 10 years of age. So, we were frothing on horse racing a lot, but footy was a big part of it in the winter just because that's all your mates were playing. So I played a lot of footy, and then when I was about 16, time to get a job. I was fit. I was sort of doing it okay in cross-country running at school and stuff, and a mate was umpiring, so I thought, instead of going to Macca's for $100 a week, I'll go up there, and that's sort of how it started, just chasing the dollars.
With umpiring, I think this is common knowledge, but for me and my understanding as well, like I know how fit you have to be to be an AFL umpire. You've competed in, I think, triathlons and Ironmans since, whilst doing this and whatnot. How fit are you guys? Like, how much training goes into, like, running? What sort of kilometres are you doing in games?
Well, that's a stuff. Yeah. Look, we are fit, particularly by the general standard of a person on the street. We're certainly field umpires. I wouldn't describe us as elite runners, but boundary umpires.
That surprises me because they're just running up and down all day.
Yeah. So they are guys, by and large, who were just not quite good enough to make sort of national standard running. They are guys that are peeling off 30 minutes for 10Ks and stuff like that, like just really, really fit dudes. And so field umpiring, you do need to be real fit. And when I say fit, you need to be able to, run to a pretty strong level. And I'd equate it probably to an on-baller at an AFL club, I would imagine. But I think what makes it difficult to, say, recruit elite level field umpires is fitness is one thing, but then your ability to comprehend the rules is another thing. So you need to have some level of intelligence to get a handle on very complicated rules. Then you need to have some degree of sort of coordination to bounce the ball, because that can get ugly if you don't do that properly. And then the final piece of the puzzle is putting that all together under extreme pressure, And
fatigue.
So that composure element's really important as well. So there are a lot of people over my journey who have been brilliant out of 2 or 3 of that 4. But if one of them's not up to scratch, you generally get exposed at some stage.
Yeah, for sure. No, I can completely agree. Well, it's like anything really, isn't it? Like football as well. You can be good at kicking, but if your fitness isn't there to match and if your game sense isn't there as well, it's sort of like a all-in-one that needs to fit. And I feel with umpiring especially that not that mistakes are made often, but even when they are, realising the fatigue and taking in the moment, the pressure under this, like how do you deal with that when you're umpiring in terms of big games, big moments, making these calls?
Yeah.
What sort of pressure are you under, or can you simplify things and be in the game, in the present?
Yeah, I can only talk from my subjective experience, and so I think you're sort of denying the reality to say, oh, it doesn't affect me, it's, the crowd, etc. I mean, at the end of the day, if the scores are level with a minute to go and there's a free kick in the goal square, you need some balls to just say, hey, I'm going to pay this. And I mean, the way I used to think of it is you just need to pull what you think is the right rein in that moment, because if you do pay it or don't pay it, there's consequences either way. You need to pay what's right. And so I always just said, I don't care, anywhere, anytime is what I used to say. You need to be an anywhere, anytime umpire, because if you decide, oh, it's late in the game, I'm just sort of not going to blow my whistle, well, you'll get smashed for missing a free kick. So you just need to pay what you think's there at all times. And that was the way that where you could look after yourself best, because it's not a situation where if you decide, oh, it's safer here not to blow the whistle, that you'll get it, because, this year already we've seen examples where free kicks haven't been paid very late in the game and there's just as much kickback. So, in terms of your sort of broader question, like how do you deal with the crowd and all those types of things, you do have to develop this very present mindset or it becomes difficult. And my experience was I was sort of able to develop that to a degree, but the reality is if you've stuffed up a free kick and it's a big ticket item, that's following you around for a bit of time.
Oh, yeah.
And you need techniques to sort of try and get yourself back. But although I felt like that was part of my game that I was pretty good at, it's still, there was still some instances where, you were sick in the guts.
Does anything jump out to mind to you now about calls that you've made, like you've said then, that really stuck with you, and to this day you still think, oh, that was a call that I got wrong, or even just a big call that you had to make in a moment that is divisive?
Oh yeah, few.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the one I love to give an example of is because it was Friday night, I think it was 2011, Friday night, Geelong had been undefeated for the year, Collingwood had been undefeated for the year, I think it was about round 8. 100,000 people, MCG. Now, if you're going to cock one up, that's not the stage to do it. Well, that was my stage. So, and what happened, the context to it all is, if you recall, 2011, the start of 2011, they changed the advantage rule. And it used to be that the umpire always calls it. So we'd sum it up and go, there's no advantage there, stop,
Yep.
And they said, look, no, just let the player, if they're silly enough to take it, it's their call.
Yep.
Right? Now, I've had 20 years of umpiring one way, this has just changed, and it's about 45 metres out of boundary throw-in. I pay the context is there's a minute to go, and
I'm already nervous.
Collingwood are down by 3 points, I think, and Geelong are up, and 45 metres out in the boundary throw-in, I pay a free kick to the Collingwood ruckman with about a minute to go. And it's a big call, but it's pretty clear. Got him over the neck. And then the ball bobbles away and everyone sort of stops and I blow time on and I'm just going to the mark. And then I hear this massive roar of the crowd. And I look around and here's the ball just sailing through the goals. And I'm like, what's happened there? And I'm like, it can't have been. Like it must have stopped. There's no way that, it can't have been an advantage. Anyway, as I had a tendency to do, I had a little sneaky look at the big screen as I'm lining it up. Well, Scotty Pendlebury has just pounced on this ball, snapped it, and drilled a goal. Clear advantage. Right? I haven't seen it. I've not allowed the goal because I'm here at the mark, right? So it wins them the game.
Yep.
I've disallowed the goal and I've got one out and I need this Collingwood ruckman. I can't remember his name. Now,
Cameron Wood?
Yes. So I'm an impartial umpire.
I love Cameron Wood, but I'm not liking his chances of this.
Well, listen to this. 45 metres out, I'm thinking this is a big kick. I sort of bring the mark back to 43. And I'm looking at this and, I'm impartial, but I'm barracking hard. I'm like, get this through, man. Yeah. So he nails his kick. It's going straight through the goals and right on the line, someone punches it through. And at that moment...
He didn't make the distance.
No.
Would he?
He's kicked it from, say, 50.
Okay.
Last quarter. I'll give him it. Anyway, the moment that got punched through, I thought, okay, this is going to be a tough week. So then it was just a circus, and, that's what it is. That's part of the game, And the way I explain it is, as you said, it's a human game played by humans, officiated by humans. All people will make mistakes at some stage, And the reality is, though, that in the AFL stage and in Victoria particularly and in Geelong particularly, Torquay, where I live, the Surf Coast, so, it's not a week where you walk around and no one's not mentioning it. They're pulling you up at every cafe and, all of that sort of stuff. And so, that's one instance of, I suppose a few over the career where you just go, this is going to be tough.
What follows that? Because not just from, I suppose, a critic's point of view, but in terms of what follows that through an umpire's point of view, like review.
Yeah.
What follows it through for yourself mentally, and then what follows it through like scrutiny in terms of like the public?
Yep. It's a really good question. So, firstly, if I can deal with me, the way by that stage, I'd made a few stuff ups over the career, and we might go into this later. But in terms of my upbringing and from a young age, the sort of path that I took in terms of what I was encouraged to take, sort of an inward path, self-reflection. I was always sort of observing, what's my attitude to this? And prior to that, I came to the conclusion that the best way to deal with these things was just go, yep. So people would say, you stuffed that up. And I go, yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I owned it and said, just a cock up, Now, it doesn't necessarily... it doesn't change anything and you still feel bad about it, but there's sort of this sense of relief that, well, it's just my error. No one else's fault. I stuffed it up, and that's it. And so I learnt that sort of owning it helped me a bit. It helped sort of relieve it. It was when, if you were defending something that was probably indefensible, there was this then internal struggle and then you were starting to argue with people and all that sort of stuff. So then in terms of the feedback, look, generally... the coaches will just go through it and say, this is wrong, this is what you could have done better, that type of stuff. And there is, well, particularly at that time, there was a weighting of mistakes, if you know what I mean. Like if there was something that you clearly should have got right and you clearly got wrong, or then, it would be taken into account more harshly. That was a bit different in the sense that the mistake was nearly understandable. The ball was hard to see. Everyone else stopped around him and all of those types of things. It wasn't like a guy got his head ripped off in the goal square and I'm sitting there calling, play on when I should have got it. But so I wasn't sort of necessarily, I wasn't like heavily criticised internally. But then, the external media, you would know, like sometimes there's a viciousness to it all, like they can go pretty hard. And that's their role, to create stories and emotions within their viewers and readers, and that's how they sell papers and all that sort of stuff. So I just really didn't listen to any of that. But unfortunately, as you guys would probably know, you get told it pretty regularly from people out and about, or messages from people and stuff like that. But so that's sort of how I tended to deal with it.
With the review of game, obviously that situation, as you said, was quite black and white. Like, yes, the free kick was there, but you should have paid it. You knew it. In terms of reviewing of games, how stringent is that of AFL, week to week? Like after games, for the general public that might not know, and I don't even know this either, how much are you going through and reviewing all of the free kicks and all the things paid?
Yep. So firstly, in terms of the coaching part of it, and then perhaps I'll talk about my approach, but the coaching part of it, is really extensive. I mean, we have a coach at every game, and the system's changed a little bit now, but for pretty much all of my career, you'd have a coach at every game, and then that coach would give you a running sheet, and it might have in the course of a game something like 60 things on it, and they are things relating to free kicks that were correct, free kicks that were missed, free kicks that you paid that were unwarranted. It'll have stuff like positioning, like you just were in a poor position, that's why you missed that, or if you keep doing that position, you're going to miss it. Importantly, in the last sort of decades, your communication, because we're mic'd up, you know, what you said, you know, how you could have explained it better, or that was good or appropriate, maybe learn off this guy, he said deals with that situation really well, you know, that sort of stuff. And then there's a lot of teamwork things, you know, could have helped your mate a bit more here, you know, all of those types of things. So that'll be an email that you might get on the Monday after a Saturday or Sunday game, and it'll be sort of a running sheet of everything, and you'll get a general feel of how your game's been assessed.
Is it like a rating, or is it more just like a pass? Or?
Yeah. I think now, which is good, everyone's different. You know, like I didn't care at all about my rating because I didn't see how that helped me. Like you do your real ratings in the background, and I'll just try and keep paying correct free kicks. But if you want your rating and all that sort of stuff, you can. And the depth of analysis that can depending on umpires as well. So then that would go into the next day, which would be training and coaching. So you do your training, your physical stuff. We'd have a group meeting, might be an hour or so, and we'd go through some general themes and some learnings out of the weekend, some good things, all that sort of stuff. And then that's generally what blows a lot of people's minds when they turn up to just view that session is you've got a lot of pretty intelligent people just tearing shreds out of things and really just digging down to what the hell do you want us to do in that situation? And, you know, umpires generally, like a lot of sports people, are driven by some aspect of fear. That is, don't send me out on that ground not knowing what to do. I need to know whenever this occurs again, what do you want me to do? Okay. And so that would be the analysis of a review on the game. And then by Tuesday, you want to have locked that away and you're starting to work towards the weekend's game. Now, on top of that, most umpires would actually then watch the game themselves, scrutinise themselves and do all that sort of stuff. And I probably did that 5 games and never did it again. And that's just a personal choice. And I'm not suggesting my approach was the correct one, but it didn't work for me. You know, I would, you know, watch the game. Oh God, why did I pay that? You know, sort of stuff. And it wasn't serving me. And so I just thought, well, I'm not just going to do this for a while and see how I go. And that just worked for me. So, I hardly ever watched a game back. I've never watched the grand final back that I've done.
Wow.
Nothing. So
in
fact, you know, this spun people. The first AFL game that I umpired was, I think, the 3rd AFL game I'd ever been to, because I came from the bush, racing family, didn't really go to Melbourne for AFL footy at all. You know, when I did the under-18 grand final, you know, I just walked outside and gave my 2 tickets for the senior game to people. And, you know, I wasn't really sort of frothing on AFL footy, you know, and that made it easier for me in terms of I didn't really have allegiances to club and really, you know, all of that. And my identity wasn't really caught up in AFL footy a lot. So anyway, I hope that...
No, it definitely does. It's funny you say that with the interest in AFL football, because I actually found that quite similar in myself. Like, since I've finished playing, I haven't been to a live game. I don't really watch games on the weekend. I don't really miss playing football at all, but it was sort of a passage. Like, I enjoy it, but it's not like, it wasn't everything for me. It's funny how you can still, you know, officiate at such a high level but not have a love for it. I think it actually does help.
Yeah, I mean, and I think everyone's different. Like it's good to have an outlet, because once you get, you know, like, it's very easy in sport, I think, for your identity to get caught up in your accomplishments or your achievements, which means that your self-worth is up and down depending on how you're going. You know, in footy, if you're playing a good game, the world's fantastic. If you're getting dropped, and it's a disaster, you know, and umpiring's the same as that. And, you know, you start to get caught up in that. I think everyone gets caught up in that circle of my self-worth's linked to how well I'm doing in my sport at any given time.
For sure. Rule changes. big topic in footy, in officiating the games. It's one of my things that I get really annoyed about in sport. Like I'm a big believer in like just leaving the game as it is, but I understand that things need to change sometimes. I don't have like a solution for the game, but I just think like the game's good. Just leave it alone. That's my opinion. How hard is it for umpires to keep up with these rule changes? Because a lot of people would know this, but stating the obvious, umpires are officiators of the game. They don't change the rules. Yeah. So each year and when rules are changed, that comes to you guys, and then you're learning to keep up with these new things. How hard is it to keep on trend and even with some of these rules, do you like them? Do you agree with them?
First part of your question, how hard is it? Every rule change makes it hard because it's another thing that you have to be on the lookout for. And not only that, there's then generally flow-on effects from it, and so it makes it really difficult in terms of are they necessary? Then, I think some of them are. And, when you look at it, it's a lot of it is sort of player behaviour driven. I came through an era where it was just trying to make it black and white in the early 2000s. Like, guy gets hit in the head, it's a free kick.
Yep.
Now, after 5, 6, 7 years of that, players thought, gee, if I just get my head near his legs or arms, I'm going to get a free kick in.
Yeah.
And players, my perception is that players will do whatever it needs to be done to get a kick or win a game of footy for their club. So they're willing to drive their head into a player's knee or arm just to get a free kick in front of goal, And then what happened is now high isn't high. Did the player duck? Did he shrug? Did he drive? Did he, Now all of this happens in 0.01 of a second. Yeah. So you see a guy get his head ripped off, but then on replay he sort of put his shoulder up or he shrugged his this, and that just happens like that. And back in the day, high is high. We didn't have to think about any of that. Was this a free kick? Now we've got to think about all of that. Now, when I started, say, 2003 to 2010, a guy would nearly get reported for an incident that now he's getting a free kick for contact below the knees.
Yeah. I know.
So he would come flying into a pack and hit a guy's head, and the guy's on the ground, and you'd report the guy. Now you're like, well, hang on, you went to ground and took his legs. And so the flip of that when you've been doing it one way for 15, 20 years. And so, but there is a purpose to it all, it's player safety.
Yep.
And then the greater purpose, in terms of this year is trying to, free the game up and flow it up. So
do you think they're working, the rule changes this year?
Yeah, well, I must say I was a little sceptical about whether a player being able to move a couple of metres laterally on a mark is going to have that much of a difference. Yeah. And I think the early signs are that
I actually do agree with it. Yeah. I actually think that works really well. It's obviously scores are up this year, which is great for everyone to watch, and we love seeing goals kicked because goals are good.
Yeah.
But realistically, that man on the mark that can't move opens up these 45s so much more that you can't defend it. You cannot defend these ball movement, which makes it so much easier. And I suppose even to keep up and officiate.
I like your view on this because you're probably more informed than mine, but my sense is that not only is it easier, but the player's mindset is changed now. The player's mindset is, I can get away with more. Now, a lot of what they're doing now, they may have been able to get away with other years, but they're encouraged to do it, and they've got the mindset that I can do it and take the risk and take them on. So it seems that seemed like a minor change has changed a mindset that players are now prepared to take greater risks in that scenario.
Yes, I could have been anything, I reckon, if I was playing in this age.
Mate, do what I did, come back.
The amount of 45s I would have ripped if there was no... See, the man on the mark would always rattle me because you have to pop it up a little bit more, then you do the loopy kick, then it's just turnover city back. So
tragedy.
Yeah, it is a tragedy. That's one of the world's biggest, that rule was not there when I was playing. With the rule change, as you were saying before, what are some rule changes that you have been hardest to get your head around? Like saying, off air, there was some things that we were saying, like, as much as you're officiating this game and delivering the rules that are needed to be had, you've had to make calls where you go, shit, Oh,
yeah. I mean, I think the point that you referred to earlier is we don't make the rules, we just have to implement them. And sometimes there's instances on the ground and you're like, I can't believe I'm going to have to pay a free kick here, and it makes you sick, and I gave the example. For me, it was hands in the back was one of those rules because I just try and keep everything very simple in every aspect of my life. And in football, it was just like free kicks fit into two categories: protection of player and enabling everyone a fair opportunity to contest the ball. So in a marking contest, I just look at it and say, has he done something that unfairly put the other guy out of the contest? Yes, he has, bang. Or there was a minor hold or a minor push, but it wasn't enough to affect the marking contest, play on. And then when we got to hands in the back, it would be not uncommon that when you paid the free kick, the guy who got the free kick didn't know it was his free kick. I mean, that was quite a common scenario because he wouldn't feel this little light touch on his back. And, of course, when it's only a hand in the back, it doesn't affect the contest at all as well. And so you'd see a guy who's just, in fact, the guy would be standing there in pole position for a mark and the person in front would back into his space and you'd have to pay the person who's backed into his space the free kick because he backed back into a guy's hands who just happened to be waiting there for the ball. And, when you're paying that in a goal square for a goal in a tight game, you're like, phew.
Oh, it's tough. I remember, I'm not sure if this is still the case on the hands in the back rule, but I do remember being a player and in the pre-season, umpires would come down and we'd sort of have practice the new rules together. And there was a day where I reckon for like 3 hours, we were practicing people coming back to us and having a straight arm rather than a bent arm. Yeah. Because a straight arm is not hands in the back because you're not pushing, but that's...
And this is a rule, and I actually love the ambiguities of the rules for a reason we might get onto, but this is a great example of a rule where it was introduced to make it black and white. It's all black and white. Hand in the back, free kick. Now, the day this got introduced, I still remember the meeting, and we're all in the meeting, and further to the point where I said, you get a group of AFL umpires together and you put in a new rule, be prepared, because,
Oh, yeah.
So there you go. Now, this is great rule. It's all black and white. And someone put out their hand and says, what's a hand? And the guy delivering the message is like, what are you talking about? What's a hand? He goes, that's a hand. Oh, okay, so 4 fingers is cool. We can just, so if they put their hand out with 4 fingers, 3, where do we stop? 2? This is, and where's the back?
Who's asking these questions?
We are, where's the back?
Yeah.
So is it the hip? Is it the side? Yeah. Is it the hip? Where's this all stuff? And that's exactly what occurred. Guys were sort of like this, okay, is that a hand? And it was sort of side-ish, back-ish, and you're sitting there going, wow, this isn't clear cut. This is actually a hell of a lot greater, far more difficult to implement. Then the fallback position, which was simply, did he push him enough to affect his ability to mark the ball? Yes, he did. Free kick. No, he didn't. Play on.
Wow.
So that's just a micro example
definitely.
of every rule that comes into play and the way it gets scrutinised and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's the intricacies are incredible, and I think that's what when at every start of every year, umpires will come out and deliver a talk, and the players can question on these and coaches and. I feel so sorry. I'm forgetting the name of the boss of AFL umpires. What was
Hayden Kennedy?
Hayden Kennedy comes out and he's got the hardest job ever of just explaining what the rules are, why they're doing them, and it's a tough role because he gets absolutely grilled by every club that he'd go present to.
And of course, the mindset of the AFL player or club generally is, okay, so how do we get around this? It's not how do we
getting a new rule. Yes.
How do we play? It's not how we play to it. It's what loopholes are there, essentially. And so holding the ball is a classic. That it was just, a player had 3 steps, balanced, steady, that'd be holding the ball. Now, if he, fends off, if he tries to evade, if he puts the ball in the air, these are all prior opportunities. Now, they happen really quickly and it looks really harsh. And then, the flip side is that if he didn't have a prior opportunity, he doesn't need to dispose of the ball. But of course, what we get asked 100 times on the ground and the crowd scream, how do you get rid of it? Well, he doesn't need to get rid of it. He didn't have a prior opportunity. And so, the understanding of all of that is it's really difficult for people to get their head around. And I get that. And but the problem is that you would probably know, I don't know how many people that you would know in mainstream football who would understand the intricacies of holding the ball.
Yeah.
Yet they're informing the public on what the decision is, whether it's correct or not. You know? And so that sometimes is where the disconnect is.
For sure. Let's talk about the money time. of football. It's playing in the big games. You've officiated 8 grand finals. Is that the most of any umpire? Have you got the record?
So this is part of the. I don't think so. I think back. Firstly, Matty Stevic did 8 last year. Brady Roseberry's done 8 as well, and then back, I think early 1900s, there was. I think somebody did 9 or 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Modern day though, it's up there. What are these games like to officiate? I can imagine as big as they are for players. Like I'm a really, as I said before, AFL is something that I love, but the grand finals are something that I just really love watching. I love everything about them. Never got to really play in many grand finals as a kid or anything, so I'm sort of obsessed with how big they are for players. But what's it like being an umpire on grand final day?
I mean, it's an incredible experience, but there's a lot of pressure with it, obviously, as well. So the whole week is a big week, and anyone that's been in an AFL grand final will tell you, like, you get to the game and you're just pretty exhausted by the end of that. And so you need to have techniques to deal with that. And I think the more you do, the more you learn that. But the game itself, particularly when it's tight, is, a high pressure environment. And it's about, what we chatted about earlier, having techniques to stay present and just deal with every contest as it unfolds. But yeah, it's a crazy week. Like, there's so much going on, and the game is just incredible. And I mean, it's funny because when you're in that game, you're it's just a game. It's not another game of footy, but it's a contest that I have to officiate, a contest I have to officiate. It's not like you're really thinking about the gravity of the circumstance. But then if you're not, and I'm just watching it, I'm sitting there going, oh my God, this is full on, Yeah. And then you realise, shit, I've done a few of them myself. Yeah. But you're like, it's. I get more nervous for my mates who are doing the game, and you're watching them, and you're like, oh man, get this right.
100%. So you've done 2008, 2009, the grand final rematch in 10, 11, you retired, and then came back, did 17, 18, 19. Those games in those grand finals, what are your favourites? I suppose going back now, which games do you look back and go, geez, that was a big game? And in those games, are there any memories that sort of the game just slowed down and you remember something happening or watching something going, shit, I'm actually here, that just happened?
Oh, I'm lucky. Some of those games have been some classics.
Incredible.
So I think 09 was the toughest game I think I've ever umpired. I think at the time it was like the most tackles ever.
Is that St Kilda Geelong?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was with the toe poke.
Yep. And so I had that incident, and you knew at the time, this is pretty cool. Like, it was just a pretty cool thing. And then like that, and I think people forget because at the end it was 10 points or something, but when the siren went, I think it was 4 points, and then someone kicked a goal, as everyone was walking away. Basically.
Was it Max Rook?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And that was tough. And, that had the point, touch the post, you throw that into the equation. Where does it sit? All that sort of stuff. Like, that was a really, really just a tough game. And then the draw was just like, that was an experience I don't think, I'll never forget that because, I just happened to be in the middle of the ground and had that last sort of minute. And you knew this has got to go any time now. I was well aware that it was a draw. When that siren went, the stillness of everyone just in shock. And you're just sitting there and you're thinking, and there was it was the only time that you sort of had this, I explain it as this sense of like, I don't know if it's over the top, but like a oneness with the players. Like, we all just could not believe that. And I was standing there, just players all around me, just exhausted. And then like Nick Del Santo had the ball and I went over and get the ball and then I helped him up, and then there was a photo of me helping him up, and then that was like everywhere the next day, and that was a pretty cool photo. But then afterwards, like, what does this mean?
Did you know like what was going to happen?
Yeah. And we knew, and there was just this sort of like, I can't believe we have to go through all this again, because grand final week for me anyway is, I think everyone experiences it differently, but you get told you're doing the grand final. I'm not really doing cartwheels. I'm just like, okay, let's get this right.
Yeah.
It's a big game. you can't stuff this up. Let's get this right. So it's just about preparation, getting it right and that sort of stuff. And then you're always telling yourself, for me, my body was always gone by the end of the year. I'm just getting through, my back's stiff, all those types of things. I might just 4 more quarters. That's all it is, 4 more quarters. You get to 3/4 time, you're like, 1 more quarter, 1 more quarter. And then the goes, you're like, that all meant nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think everyone had that same experience. Like, Jesus, we've got to do this all again. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And then the other one was obviously the West Coast Collingwood.
Dom Sheed?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. So that was a really good game.
This one hurts a lot of Collingwood people, and just because of on the fact now that game obviously has a bit of what would you say? There's a bit of a conjecture about what happened there with Willie Rioli.
Yep.
The hands. What's the officiation on that in your point of view? Was that called? I'm happy it was called like that. Don't get me wrong, but is that correct?
It was correct, and look. The thing is in AFL footy, and this isn't a cop-out, there is so many 50-50 calls in AFL footy, right? You could marginally go this way or marginally go that way. And so, look, I wasn't aware of that at the time. I was in the other zone, and so I wasn't aware that any possibility of a free kick and didn't even know anything about it until sort of the next day. But, you look at it back and the Collingwood players sort of searching for Willie Rioli first because he thinks he thinks that's where the drop of the ball's going to be, and then realises no, it's not. It's going to be another 2 metres ahead of it, and then Willie Rioli's like, "No, I'm here. You're not getting past me. This is where it is, you know." And so I can understand that definitely being a play on call. And
even with those calls too, if that happens in the first quarter, it probably never even gets brought up again.
No, of
it's
course
just
it
time and perspective of what's probably happened. Anything else? I could talk about grand final stories all day. Is anything else stick out that even just like run-ins with players? I suppose do they say anything in these big games where you're just thinking like this player's in a grand final but they've just done this?
Yeah. Well, like little silly quirky ones like guys like say Jimmy Bartell and Dusty Martin. Like it's just like they're having a kick with their mates at the park. 5 minutes to go, score's level in a grand final. You know what I mean? Like it's just like just having fun out here, just getting a kick. And like I remember in 2009, and it was deep in the last quarter, and it started raining, and I've got the ball, and you just okay, let's switch on here. And Jimmy Bartell's next to me, he's like, "Gee, it's heavy this rain, isn't it, mate? What do you reckon this shot? It's going to pour down." I'm like, "Hey Jimmy, 2 minutes to go, mate. 4-point game."
Yeah.
And it was seriously just like, oh, it's just another game of footy. And that sort of stuff does relax you a little bit as well. And Dusty's very similar. Like he's but the perception is he's just loving kicking a footy, and that joy in professional sport is cool to see because it's just, we get so overridden with structures and this and that and things we got to do, and just that instinctive joy of footy is pretty cool.
You've mentioned those two there, and I suppose being able to see them just in their element, purely straight in the zone, as you said, like that's incredible. Who are some of your favourite players over your career that you've been able to watch? And obviously you sort of build a rapport with these people because you're officiating most of their games through the years. Is there any other players that stick out to you that you just love to officiate?
There's players in terms of personality, but in terms of like just love and see them in full flight, Buddy's probably my number. Like if he's up and about, he's just unbelievable to see. Cyril Rioli, he was another one. And then back in the day there was, guys like say Warren Treadray. I probably did Treadray, Hurd and Jonathan Brown were sort of three guys that I don't know how many games I did where they just tore the bag out of it. You're talking like 17 marks, 7 goal, this sort of stuff. And particularly Jonathan Brown and Hurd were two guys who a couple of times had come off like massive injuries, like 16 weeks with broken cheekbones or something. And then first week back were like 16 marks, 5 goals, best on ground. And you're like, whoa, this guy doesn't even need a few weeks to get back into it. They're just straight into it. So, yeah, like in terms of like just loving watching them play, I think Buddy, Cyril and probably Dusty, I just love the way he just goes about it. And the thing with Dusty, and to be honest, most of the great players, like Ablett and Judd and these guys, Dane Swan, another, you just don't hear boo from them. Like, pay a free kick and they just put their hands up and that's it. And they just don't bother arguing with you. And the other thing is, I call it, you can trust them. And what I mean by that from an umpiring point of view is sometimes when a guy throws his head back and you've umpired him a few times, look, unless I see this guy get hit in the head, I'm not prepared to pay a free kick here. But if Dusty Martin goes to ground and hold his nose, he's got one in the face. And Dane Swan was a classic. Marking contest, he's just doing whatever he can to hold his ground. And if he gets put on his bum, he's copped a real shove, where other guys, you go, well, I'm not sure whether there was much in that, even though he's sprawled on the ground. So you start to learn over the years, I can trust this guy. And, these are the little things that experience gives you.
For sure. On the contrary to that, who are some players that made it very hard to officiate? Like, was there any players that, obviously, when you cross a field, you're a different person, not attacking their character at all, but in terms of arguing with the umpires or not being able to trust, like for some players, arguing with umpires actually would get them into the zone, I feel. Like, is there any people that stick out to mind?
Look, guys who were often hard. So in terms of, say, Glenn Archer was one who was just, my sense was he just this white line fever. Like, he got on the ground and he just needed to beat his opponent. And I sensed there was like this sort of level of like anxiety as well, like you got really amped up, and then when you blew your whistle, that would naturally just flow over into, well, you're the guy that you've given a free kick to my opponent, and he was always defender, so I mean he's going to get a goal basically. And so he was one that loved to question decision. There was then there's some guys who are quite smart. And these intelligent players give you the shits because they often know the rules. And when you've made a mistake, they know you've made a mistake. Yeah. And you've made a mistake. And, like if you're like a Joel Bowden or a Jared Roughhead, these guys are pretty cluey and they knew the rules. And they would just saddle up to you and say, well, how's that a prior opportunity if that, this, that and the other, or,
I'll never forget that day, Joel Bowden. He probably changed that rule of rush behinds when he kept playing on from fullback and just walking back over the line. Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and I remember having an incident with Joel. It's a minor incident, but as an example, where a player kicked across the ground to him, and I've adjudged after it left his boot, and I looked where Joel was, this won't be 15. So I start calling play on not 15 a second after it's left his boot. He's having a crack at me mid-air, right? Before he's taken the mark, about how would I know that it's 15 metres if the mark hasn't completed yet? Yeah. Right? And so then we had this great banter about, well, I'll tell you what I'll do next time. I won't give you any notice. I'll wait till you mark it. Then I'll call and play on, and someone will tackle you. Yeah, that's what I'll give you no notice, Joel. And there was just this to and fro, and it was just like, this guy knows the rules. He's all over it. So.
Huge. 2011, after the big grand final, that's when you retire.
Yep.
Where did that decision come from? Was it something that you just thought, look, I'm tired, I'm finished? What was the reasoning behind the retirement?
A lot of things, but the short of it is I just wasn't enjoying it at all. And, when you in a grand final and you're just really not enjoying it, just like get the grand final, you're like, okay. And just the love of the whole game and everything had just been sucked out of it for me. And there was a combination of things, I think, in retrospect. I was busy at work, had a really young family. I was travelling up from Torquay. But the other thing was I'd probably had come off a back of 5 or 6 years where, although I loved it at the time, I was probably doing nearly every big game, whether it's Friday night or Saturday night or Anzac Day finals, grand finals. And the scrutiny on those games is pretty severe. And, the reality is if you do 100 of those games, there's going to be a handful at least where you're just getting pulled apart. And I think in retrospect, like just getting up every single week it just started to wear me down. And the reality was, I sort of said a long time ago, I will only do things that I enjoy. And after 2011, I just thought, after the grand final, I thought, I'm not actually enjoying this at all. In fact, the opposite. I'm not enjoying it. I'm hating it. And so, I thought, well, why am I doing it? And, I'd done 5 grand finals by that stage and sort of achieved way more than I thought I could. So I just thought, well, time's right. Let's give it away. So that was it.
You alluded to something earlier saying from your upbringing you were able to develop like skills to bring you back into the present and find your love for footy again and umpiring. Was that something you had to like revisit in that stage? Is that probably where that kicked in? Or
yeah, my mum, when I was about 11, got diagnosed with leukemia, and so one of her good friends was sort of new age for that time, really new age, and came and delivered her all these meditation tapes. And I sort of seen the transformation that it had with her, and it was pretty profound. So then I would go and nick these tapes, and I'd use them sort of on and off. But then when I got into year 12, and I started to just use them in pressure situations. And so year 12 started to ramp up the pressure exams and that, and I'd start to go in and do all these types of things.
So what sort of meditation is this? Just like you're listening to someone
this
talk,
was just
or?
initially guided meditations, So, so I started doing that, and that was a real gift for me. I was really lucky and really fortunate that sort of came in my path. And I used that a fair bit from then on and off, but, pretty much daily. And then as I got to the stage where I was like a barrister, AFL umpire, all those types of things, it really assisted me to juggle all of it. But I don't think the technique was in any way perfect. I was still finding new things and stumbling around, but it was just a process of constant self-evaluation and that sort of stuff. So that was something that really assisted me. But then by 2011, I just wasn't enjoying it. And to get to your point, I had 3 years off where I was really, really enjoying retirement, just loving it. And then, out of the blue, get a call from Hayden Kennedy and this is probably getting maybe too woo-woo-y for, I don't know, for your listeners. I'm not sure who your audience is, but I've always been really big in like signs from the universe, in that sense. Wow. Yeah. I'm talking to the right man.
Yeah.
So, and to me, the way I'm wired, it's not a very illogical thing that there's a divine presence that's orchestrating much of what's going on, of which, it's intertwined with us all. That to me seems sensible. And so, I've often looked out for those signs and, instead of using the human mind to nut my way through, like just give me a sign. And I would often say to the universe, I need a sign and I need it in a way that's easy to understand and clear because I'm really confused now, So the short of all of that woo-woo story is that...
Oh, we love the woo-woo. Please don't skip the woo-woo.
Yeah, so Hayden rang, and to be honest, it made me sick about going back. And I'm sort of delving into a story that I probably haven't really expressed to too many, but I did not want to go back, but I was also like, why the hell is this coming to me right now? I'd been retired for 3 years. I was like 38 at the time. And I'm like, this is really strange. And I met with Hayden and Wayne, and they were really good. It wasn't like we're desperate to get you back. It's just like, look, we think you retired too early. You've got some good years ahead of you, and we don't want you to regret, this. We think you can add a bit, those types of things. And my immediate reaction, to be honest, was I feel like I had a good career and I left some sort of legacy that was okay. I reckon there's a real chance I make an ass of myself if I come back, and that was the fear of it. And this was around the exact same time that was it Thorpe and Phelps and that were coming back and just making horrible goes of it, And I'm like, I don't really want to do this. Anyway, but to your point, I just sort of like kept saying like, I don't understand why this is happening. And then I remember I dropped my daughter off, and this is the woo-woo-y part. I dropped my daughter off at ballet, and I was like, I've got to get back to him, and I'm really confused. I don't know what to do. I'll go for this run, but I need a sign, and I don't know what to do. So I got back to the car after the run, and as I'm opening the gate to go and pick her up, this lady comes from the opposite direction and says, look, I know you don't know who I am, but I reckon you need to go back umpiring because they really need you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
what?
Okay, I'm going back. And so that was,
you didn't know the lady?
No, I didn't know her. And the timing was quite incredible. And I'm like, okay, there's the sign. And that's, it sounds stupid that every part of my being was like, don't do this. But then I thought there's got to be a greater purpose to all of this. Why would these people be ringing out of the blue and all that type of stuff? So the short of it is, I said I'd come back, and for the first 3 months, it just made me sick, like, trying to get in there. And then I got back to the group. So I think that was in like about near the end of the year, 2014, and I got back 2015, and in 3 years, you wouldn't believe how much this game has changed. There was 15 rule changes. The positioning was now completely different. I'd umpired under Rowan Saws and Jeff Geisha. Now Hayden Kennedy his take on it was completely different. What we said to the players, where we bounced to the back to the short side, now it's a long side, where we stood in positions, it was like a different game. And I remember saying to my wife in November, I'm going to give this to mid-December, and if I don't come good, I'm done here. Anyway, we sort of got through a period, and I did my first, whatever it was, NAB Cup or whatever it was called back then. And it was the worst I've bounced statistically and the worst I've umpired decisionally in my life. First game back, it was a horror show. And I thought, this is just so bad. And my fears are coming like, you are making an ass of yourself, And it was just horrible. And then got in, did a few of those preseason games, started coming a bit better, and then I remember I did Carlton Collingwood about round 5. It was Mick Moldhouse's game where he broke the record or something.
Oh, yeah, I played in that game.
Okay. Did I get...
Oh, God. That was a bad day for Carlton.
Yeah. I can't remember the game at all, but I just remember that was the first game I thought, okay, I'm sort of getting back here a little.
Well, I'm happy you had a good day. I definitely didn't. That was, I think, probably the most disappointing... Like, put it into context, Mick Moldhouse were playing Carlton versus Collingwood. Mick was obviously coaching Carlton. He was breaking the game's record of coaching, and it was built up as like one of the biggest games of the year.
Yeah.
And the pressure for us to perform on that night, to show respect for Mick as a coach and these things, and we got beat by probably nearly 100 points.
Yeah.
And I just remember going in the next day, and that was nearly the start of the end, the beginning of the end for Mick at Carlton, because it was just huge. It was, he was meant to be this like celebration of Mick Moldhouse, and his team just lost by 100 points. And some of the words that we got said to, I couldn't repeat them on camera.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the mindset of the umpire. I don't remember that game at all. No. I'm just like, I had a solid day.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
But yeah, that's. But I remember it was a big game for for the Carlton team and for Mick and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so to continue the story, I suppose that so I got through that year, and I was probably serviceable, and it was actually the first time in my whole career from juniors that I never made the finals panel, and I'm like, do I keep going here? I mean, it was serviceable, but I'm not just going to deliver serviceable, and then. I decided to do this 10-day silence meditation retreat in Tassie called Vipassana, and that was start of this 2016 season, like January, and that was what I needed. Yeah, and that's a long way of getting back to your comment a few minutes ago about, is this a time when you revisited that sort of meditation stuff? And so that sort of really assisted in resetting me.
What is this? What did you do on the camp?
Well, to be honest, it sounds extreme, but for 10 days, 12 days, you get there on the first day, they talk to you about it, et cetera, and then 10 days straight, you basically you're in silence, don't talk to anyone.
For 10 days?
Yeah, that's a joy. That part of it for me was unreal. I don't have to talk to anyone, I don't have to look at anyone, I don't have to do anything, interact with anyone. It's actually a great break. No phones, no nothing. Well, that's all goes away. But the hard part is you are sitting, meditating cross-legged for about 12 to 14 hours, I would imagine, each day. And you just, like, they're just teaching you these techniques of just, self-awareness. And you start to learn the structure of the mind, the structure of the human ego. You start to learn, belief systems, limiting belief systems, transcending those belief systems. You start to observe how this mind, body, spirit organism is sort of operating, and you start to actually, go within and know yourself a bit better. And that was really big, because not only did it reset me, but it gave me a technique that I felt was really solid that I could then take forward. And what then crystallised after that is, hey, mate, the purpose for this is not to do grand finals. It's to actually find the joy in this sport again. This is what the whole purpose of this was. And so it was like a full circle, awakening, where I'm like, oh, man, you're trying to do this sport to get an outcome, being grand finals or whatever it is, and the pats on the back. But I've been pulled back here to, can I do this sport, which is a sport in a pretty hostile, critical environment, but actually enjoy it? Because umpiring is a pretty hard sport to enjoy. You're measured on your errors. That's how you're assessed. How many mistakes did I make? We never go into the rooms after a game and punch the air and say we won and any of this. It's just, I'm only made this many errors as opposed to that many errors. That's how you measure. So that became the journey, from 2016 to the end was, okay, I'm going to find the joy in this sport. I'm going to do this sport from a place of joy if I can, and I'm going to retire loving this sport. And so that was the ambition from then. And I describe it as, I transitioned from like an ambition phase in my life to a meaning phase. I wanted to experience things, sort of a greater depth. And that was really valuable. And, I'm really grateful for that experience. I'm really grateful for getting the opportunity to come back to then have that experience. And then what unfolded is, eventually through a number of techniques, including Vipassana and self-reflection, observing myself and, why did I have that certain attitude in that scenario, and asking all these questions, I found that joy, and a lot of that joy for umpiring doesn't necessarily come in the game, which is a high sort of pressure environment. It comes from the group and it comes from within. And so that sort of become nearly our group mantra, that externally we're not going to get the validations. On the ground, you're not going to get the validations. If we're going to enjoy this, let's create an environment of joy where, there's a genuine care, genuine love for each other, and we just love being around this AFL umpiring group. So that was sort of the transition, and that takes us to last year. And, I got to the stage where I'm like, well, I'm 45. I've done everything I want to. I'm just loving this sport. I'm loving this group. This is exactly what I wanted to achieve. I'm here. Let's close this chapter, it's huge. Done. And so, I did the prelim final last year, and it was actually quite a nice ending, I thought, because everyone, including myself, was like, what a way to go out a grand final. And I didn't get it, and I didn't get it because I didn't deserve it. But when you look at it, and I told you that whole story, it's actually, a nice metaphor to say, well, that's not why you came. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. It was about just the joy of the whole thing, and what a way to finish, being in sort of like a group, a hub with all your mates and their families, and meeting their partners and their kids and all that sort of stuff. And that was just a really cool environment to finish. And I thought, I just can't think of a better way to put a full stop on it. And so that was the end. Crazy.
The camp thing is, I have so many questions about this camp.
The Vipassana retreat?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Like, I listen to music. I have my AirPods in. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm making phone calls. I'm listening to music. I'm on my laptop. I really, really struggle being silent.
Yeah.
Like I get like really agitated, and like, it's because I've worked out in my head. It's like, I need my brain to always be stimulated to keep me not thinking about other things. So now, to the point of this, and why I'm so interested in this fact, is like, when I'm in the car and I've had a big day, I try and just sit in silence on the way home and put my phone away.
Yeah.
Because then it's sort of, instead of listening to a music or zoning out into a podcast, I'm actually just thinking about everything that I did that day and try and slow down and pick off the points where the day was good, what I've got to do next. And I found it's actually really hard to do. Like, I still don't like doing it. I'd rather just put the easy option in and listen to a music or listen to a podcast. Is that what the silence is, or am I just totally wrong there?
I mean, if I was to explain it in a sporting context that most of your listeners would understand, is the human mind is a function of the body. And if we ran all day, every day, you wouldn't last long and you'd break down. What we're taught to do at school is to think, and then at work to think, and now with social media to think, and with our phones to think, and then we read the paper, and then we put the radio on, and then we watch the news, and then we listen to podcasts. Our mind is going all the time, and no one ever teaches us to give it a rest. And so this is a technique that assists in giving it that rest. And, you know, your example is a good one, because I often do that as well. If I'm traveling, you know, long distances, I'll say, I'm just going to sit in silence here, and then you'll sense the energy within your body wanting to do something.
I get twitchy. Like, I just grab my phone, try and call someone, or it's just being alone, you know?
Yeah, and so this is one technique that assists you. Like, what do you do in that situation? So, you know, and there'll be an energy that you'll feel, like it might be in your solar plexus, and it's pulling you to do something. It's like, no, I've got to do it. So then you go into that energy. Like, the thoughts are irrelevant. The thoughts will just arise by reason of whatever sensation's going in your body, because if an event occurs and you feel a certain way, that then creates thoughts. So what they're teaching you to do is sever that identification and attachment with that process, so that when you feel a certain way, you don't then identify with the thoughts that are dribbling through your mind.
With what you're saying, it's obviously had a profound impact on you and how you've gone about it, and how you stay present, and how you became such a good officiator of the game. With that, the biggest thing, you know, nearly umpires are known for, as well as doing your role, is Brownlow time. Brownlow medal's huge. What's the process of doing Brownlow medal votes?
It's field umpires, including emergency. The field umpires will sign it off, but we'll get input from the emergency umpire. Don't get given any stats or anything like that, although they might flash them up on the screen during the day from time to time. But I think I haven't seen it much in later years, but they used to. And then the emergency umpire might have seen that. But we will then, at the end of the game, you know, after we've probably got changed and done all of that, just the field umpires and the emergency umpire will go away in a room, and we'll just start with the team sheets. And it's usually just a process of elimination. No. I tried to fit in a couple of times still.
Yeah. I know.
Did you get any?
No, I didn't. I've been thinking about that. We tried to check before. You're off the hook because you weren't umpiring this day, but I was just certain, I think it was round 22, 2016, Carlton versus Melbourne. I sung the Ds, absolutely killed them, and buried their finals hopes. They're just recovering now from it in 2021. But yeah, no votes.
No votes?
No.
Yeah. We've got a few wrong over the years.
Yeah, that's one of them.
That's clearly
Look, you're human.
Yeah.
It's okay. But that one was...
You've moved on at least.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think about it at all. Yeah.
It's probably a big thing, is it? Like, just to say I did get a few votes.
Yeah, no, I didn't get any.
Yeah. So the process is that, and...
Do you think that by the time Brownlow's on, you have a good indication of who's going to win, or is it just totally obscured?
I think it depends. You would often say the good teams are Collingwood, Geelong, etc. You might be doing them 8 times, 9 times, and you might have a reasonable idea. But in the last sort of 7-8 years, it doesn't seem to be that. It seems like there's a spread where guys aren't really doing teams a lot. And then if that's the case, I mean, if you're doing a team 3 times, you really wouldn't have much of a clue.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a hell of a lot of an idea in the last sort of 6-7 years, because I just haven't done teams enough.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think, like, even in the last few years, there's always... I have a big theory on Brownlow medals, and this isn't a hit at the umpires, it's more like the media as well. You nearly have to deserve to win a Brownlow. So at the end of the year, they go, for example, Lachie Neale. Like, Lachie Neale probably had a better year the year before he won the Brownlow, and then he won it the next year.
Yeah.
It's like you sort of have to nearly win it to then get recognised to then win it.
Yeah, like, it's an interesting point. I mean, we would say, no, that's not the case. But history says, you know, Dane Swan was the same. I think Chris Judd was the same. Gary Ablett was the same. There's a few of them that were close. And then the next year, you know, they got the nod. So, and I'm not sure about which year was better and all that sort of stuff. But apart from the odd one in the last 20 years, most of the people who
they've been pretty spot on. Yeah,
they're like pretty up there in everyone's. And there's the whole talk about on-ballers award and all those types of things. But we have gone through an era where the on-ballers have been pretty sort of elite as well.
What's next for you now in the next phase, post AFL umpiring careers? Anything on the agenda? What can we be expecting to see?
I think in the short term, and I haven't really sort of contemplated a long term, but in the short term, I'm just enjoying like investing more time in the family. And although I have always tried to do that, the ability to just go, like 3 weeks ago, I just said to my little fella Ned, we're going hiking. That's it. Friday, just grabbed the stuff, went down the surf coast, 3 days hiking up the coast. I could never have done that, just go on a holiday whenever we want. Just, we're going fishing, just doing all the stuff that when I grew up in Warrnambool, this is the stuff you did, you just went fishing, jumped on your bikes, went mountain biking and hiking, all that sort of stuff. So I'm just enjoying being able to do that. So that's about the extent of it, just work and family at the moment.
It's huge. I actually bought a swag not long ago. So if you and Ned need some more experience,
get down the Great Ocean.
Yeah, if you need some more experienced campers, more than happy to jump in on that.
Yeah, do that. Just a swag.
Just a swag. That's
Middle of winter.
That's all I've got.
Love it.
Shaun Ryan, thank you so much for coming in today, mate. You are a serious operator. You've absolutely dominated the AFL umpiring ranks, and should be extremely proud of yourself in a caper that is so tough. And you've done an awesome role, and I know internally how well respected you are in the AFL community, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you in the studio to tell your story.
Thanks, Dyl. Appreciate it. Appreciate having me in, and appreciate the time and the questions and your interest of it all.
And a big thank you to Bloke In A Bar Lager. Today I have a very special offer for you. Head to mrliquor.com.au and order a sub of Bloke In A Bar using the code FRIENDS to get free shipping to your door. That's friends like me and you. Bloke In A Bar has been an unbelievable support to me and the show, and with their help and commitment, I've been able to reinvest back into the podcast, bringing you more content with plenty of new ideas and concepts coming soon. Bloke In A Bar have backed me in to do this full time, so the more we can support Bloke In A Bar by grabbing a slab, it also helps build and grow Dyl Friends. So check it out, head to mrliquor.com.au and order a slab of Bloke In A Bar using the code FRIENDS at the checkout to get free shipping to your door.